Throughout history, many experiments have been conducted in the name of science, some of which have resulted in lasting harm and controversy. In this video, we will explore some of the most shocking and disturbing experiments in modern history. Number 1. Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment, 1932 to 1972. The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment was a study conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service from 1932 to 1972 in Tuskegee, Alabama. The study aimed to investigate the natural progression of untreated syphilis in black men, who were not informed of their diagnosis and denied proper treatment. The participants, who were mostly poor and illiterate, were told that they were being treated for bad blood, a term used to describe a variety of conditions including anemia, fatigue, and syphilis. The researchers did not inform the participants that they had syphilis, or that the study was designed to observe the progression of the disease. As a result, the participants were not given the standard treatment for syphilis, which was penicillin. Instead, they were given placebos, aspirin, and other ineffective treatments. The study continued even after the discovery of penicillin as a treatment for syphilis in the 1940s. The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment was highly unethical, as it violated the participants' right to informed consent and their right to receive proper medical treatment. The study resulted in the death of at least 28 participants from syphilis-related complications, and many more suffered serious health problems as a result. The experiment was widely criticized, and it led to significant changes in the way medical research is conducted, including the requirement of informed consent from research participants. Number 2. Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971. The Stanford Prison Experiment was a study conducted in 1971 by psychologist Philip Zimbardo at Stanford University in California. The study aimed to investigate the psychological effects of power and authority in a simulated prison environment. In the experiment, a group of college students were randomly assigned to be either prisoners or guards in a simulated prison environment. The guards were given complete control over the prisoners and were instructed to maintain order and enforce rules. The experiment was intended to last for 2 weeks, but it was terminated after only 6 days due to the extreme psychological and emotional distress experienced by the participants. The guards quickly became abusive and authoritarian, while the prisoners became submissive and showed signs of extreme stress, anxiety, and depression. Some of the guards used physical and psychological torture against the prisoners, including forcing them to perform humiliating and degrading acts. The Stanford Prison Experiment was highly controversial and criticized for its ethical issues, including lack of informed consent, psychological harm to the participants, and the creation of an unethical and unrealistic environment. The experiment had a significant impact on the field of psychology and raised important ethical questions about the use of human subjects in research. Number 3. Nazi Medical Experiments, 1939 to 1945. During World War II, Nazi doctors conducted gruesome medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners. These experiments were conducted without the informed consent of the subjects and were often designed to inflict pain, suffering, and death. The experiments included exposing prisoners to extreme cold or heat, testing the limits of human endurance, and infecting them with diseases such as malaria, typhus, and tuberculosis. Other experiments involved removing organs, limbs, and bone marrow without anesthesia, and testing new drugs and treatments. One of the most notorious experiments was conducted by Dr. Joseph Mengele, who performed experiments on twins in an effort to discover the secrets of heredity. He injected children with chemicals, made them undergo painful procedures, and sometimes killed them to perform autopsies. The Nazi medical experiments were a horrific violation of human rights and the Hippocratic Oath, which states that physicians must, first, do no harm. Many of the subjects died as a result of the experiments, and survivors suffered lifelong physical and psychological trauma. The Nuremberg Code, which established guidelines for ethical medical research, was developed in response to the atrocities committed during this period. Number 4. Project MKUltra, 1953 to 1973. Project MKUltra was a secret CIA program conducted from 1953 to 1973 that aimed to develop techniques for mind control and interrogation. The project involved administering drugs, such as LSD, to unwitting participants, including mental patients, prisoners, and members of the general public, in order to observe their reactions. The project also involved experiments in sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, and hypnosis. The CIA hoped to use these techniques to create Manchurian candidates, individuals who could be brainwashed into carrying out assassinations and other covert operations. The experiments were highly unethical and violated the participants' right to informed consent. Many of the subjects suffered long-term physical and psychological harm, including psychosis and other mental disorders. The project was exposed in the 1970s, and the U.S. government officially apologized for its actions in 1995. Number 5. Unit 731, 1937 to 1945. Unit 731 was a secret biological and chemical warfare research unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that operated from 1937 to 1945. The unit was located in Manchuria, China, and conducted horrific experiments on prisoners of war, including Chinese, Korean, and Russian civilians, as well as political prisoners. The experiments included vivisection, dissecting live subjects without anesthesia, infecting prisoners with diseases like anthrax and bubonic plague, freezing body parts, and testing the effects of various chemicals on the human body. Many of the experiments were designed to simulate combat conditions and to develop biological weapons. The prisoners were referred to as logs and were treated with extreme cruelty and inhumane conditions. Thousands of prisoners died as a result of the experiments, and the unit also conducted large-scale biological attacks on Chinese civilians, which resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of people. The atrocities committed by Unit 731 were kept secret by the Japanese government for many years after World War II, and the researchers involved in the experiments were not held accountable for their actions. The unit's activities were only fully revealed in the 1980s, and it remains one of the most disturbing and unethical experiments in modern history.
Don't forget to like and share this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel for more top 10 videos like this one.
Number 6. Monster Study, 1939. The Monster Study, also known as the Iowa Orphanage Study, was conducted in 1939 by Wendell Johnson, a speech pathologist at the University of Iowa. The study aimed to investigate the origins of stuttering and to find ways to prevent it. The study involved 22 orphan children, half of whom had a history of stuttering. The children were divided into two groups. One group was praised for their speech, while the other group was criticized for their speech and told that they had a speech impediment, even if they did not. The study's findings were inconclusive, but the harm caused by the study was significant. The children who were told that they had a speech impediment showed increased levels of anxiety, low self-esteem, and in some cases, long-term speech problems. Some of the children continued to struggle with speech and confidence issues for the rest of their lives. The Monster Study is considered unethical due to the harm caused to the children involved, and it raised important ethical questions about the use of vulnerable populations in research. Number 7. The Milgram Experiment, 1961. The Milgram Experiment was a social psychology experiment conducted by Stanley Milgram in 1961 at Yale University. The study aimed to investigate obedience to authority figures and the willingness of people to inflict harm on others under the instruction of an authority figure. The study involved a teacher who was instructed to administer electric shocks to a learner whenever they made a mistake in a memory task. The shocks ranged from mild to severe and were labeled with increasing voltage levels. In reality, the learner was a confederate of the experimenter and did not actually receive shocks. The results of the study were shocking. Despite hearing the learner screaming in pain, most participants continued to administer shocks, even up to the maximum level. The study showed that people were willing to inflict pain on others under the instruction of an authority figure, even if it went against their own moral beliefs. The Milgram experiment raised important ethical questions about the use of deception in research and the potential harm caused to participants. Critics argue that the study caused psychological harm to participants, and that it may have reinforced the idea that people are willing to obey authority figures even when it goes against their own moral beliefs. Number 8. The Robbers Cave Experiment, 1954. The Robbers Cave Experiment was a social psychology experiment conducted in 1954 by Muzaffar Sharif and his colleagues at the Robbers Cave State Park in Oklahoma. The study aimed to investigate intergroup conflict and the conditions that promote cooperation between groups. The study involved 22 young boys who were divided into two groups and taken to separate campsites within the park. The two groups were then encouraged to develop their own cultures, identities, and hierarchies. The researchers then introduced a series of competitions between the two groups, such as tug-of-war and baseball games. As the competition intensified, the two groups became increasingly hostile towards each other, with members engaging in name-calling, physical violence, and vandalism. The researchers then introduced a series of tasks that required cooperation between the two groups, such as fixing a water supply. Through these tasks, the researchers were able to reduce intergroup conflict and increase cooperation between the two groups. The Robbers Cave experiment raised important ethical questions about the use of deception in research and the potential harm caused to participants. Critics argue that the study caused psychological harm to the participants, and that the researchers may have manipulated the results to fit their hypothesis. Additionally, the study has been criticized for reinforcing the idea of group identity and for not considering the broader societal and historical factors that contribute to intergroup conflict. Number 9. The Little Albert Experiment, 1920. The Little Albert Experiment was a controversial psychology experiment conducted by John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner in 1920 at Johns Hopkins University. The study aimed to investigate the origins of fear in humans and whether fear could be conditioned in infants. The study involved a 9-month-old baby named Albert, who was presented with various stimuli, including a white rat, a rabbit, a monkey, and a burning newspaper. Initially, Albert did not show any fear of these stimuli. However, when a loud noise was played behind Albert's head while he was looking at the white rat, he became frightened and began to cry. The researchers then repeated the experiment several times, presenting the white rat to Albert and playing the loud noise behind his head. Eventually, Albert began to associate the rat with the loud noise and would become frightened and cry whenever he saw the rat, even in the absence of the loud noise. The Little Albert experiment is controversial due to the potential harm caused to the infant participant. Critics argue that the experiment was unethical, as the researchers did not obtain informed consent from Albert's mother and did not attempt to alleviate his fear. Additionally, the experiment has been criticized for its lack of scientific rigor and its limited ability to explain the origins of fear in humans. Number 10. Harlow's Monkey Experiments, 1957 to 1963. Harlow's monkey experiments were a series of controversial psychology experiments conducted by Harry Harlow in the late 1950s and early 1960s at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The study aimed to investigate the effects of maternal deprivation and social isolation on infant monkeys. The study involved separating infant monkeys from their mothers and placing them in isolated cages with surrogate mothers made of wire or cloth. The wire surrogate mother provided food, while the cloth surrogate mother provided comfort and warmth. The study found that infant monkeys preferred the cloth surrogate mother and would cling to it for comfort, even when the wire mother provided food. Harlow's monkey experiments raised ethical concerns regarding animal welfare and the potential harm caused to the monkeys. Critics argue that the study caused psychological harm to the monkeys, including anxiety, depression, and social dysfunction. Additionally, the study has been criticized for its lack of scientific rigor and its limited ability to explain human behavior and development. The study was also controversial due to its implications for human parenting practices. Critics argue that the study reinforced the idea that bonding and attachment between infants and caregivers are solely based on physical needs, and that emotional and social needs are secondary. However, subsequent research has shown that emotional and social needs are equally important for human infants and children.
Join the Top 10 magazine community today and never miss a beat. Subscribe now.